Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at a really special watch. This is the Seiko SJE093, and I've been waiting for this watch for a really long time, ever since Seiko announced it. This is another recreation of the original 62 Moss from 1963. And as you guys guessed, this is a limited edition to 1963 pieces. All right, so let's take a look. So it's pretty standard outer white sleeve. And this is the outer box for the watch. And surprisingly, they changed it up from the previous watches that I've had. This is more of like a matte finish, just looks like a paper cardboard white Seiko box. And you have that classic Seiko logo in gold. Pretty interesting. It's typical gold writing back there as well. All right, let's open this up. It looks like Seiko's trying to do the Grand Seiko route. Got some paper here. Now, Grand Seiko uses rice paper. I don't know if this is any kind of special paper. It just looks like typical wax paper, maybe a little thicker than that, but I understand what they're going for. Just pull this out right here. So inside here, you'll find your instructions manual and your limited warranty card. And here is the watch box, guys. So this looks like a leather covering for the watch box. Kind of hard to tell if it's real leather, but the back of the box did specify where the leather was made, so I'm assuming that this box is real leather, and it feels pretty good quality, and wood inside. So nice classic Seiko gold writing right there. And if you recognize this box, that's a good sign for you guys, because that means you guys are either huge vintage fans or you've been living long enough to see the original 1962 Moss release, because when we open this up, you'll see that this is the exact recreation of that vintage box. And that is so cool. And you guys know I'm a sucker for these special limited boxes or vintage inspired boxes. They're just so cool. Special boxes are just like a little surprise. Take this out. There it is, beautiful. And right off the bat, you guys can see this is the OG 62 Moss with the gray dial. Nice blue lining inside the box. And a lot of you guys are gonna be asking, wait, didn't this already release? And the answer is yes. In 2017, they did release a 62 Moss original recreation with the gray dial, the SLA017, the ever so popular. But they've remade it once again for 2023. And as with most re-releases, which Seiko does, they do change a couple things, as it's not exactly the same as the previous iteration. So for this one, let me show you guys the hang tag. So Seiko prospects, and there's the price. This was $3,500. Now you'll see right here, even on the hang tag, one of the differences. It says caliber 6L37. So that's right, this is not a 8L movement, this is a 6L movement. But Seiko is advertising that as their new higher end movement, which was created as a slimline high-end movement for their divers in particular. And they will be called the 6L movement. So let's just peel this off here. Beautiful. And the case finishing on this is absolutely spectacular. The edges are all very sharp. You have that really nice contrast from polished to brushed finishes. And this is actually a smaller case than the previous iterations. This one is a 38mm case versus the SLA017, which was more like a 40. So slightly smaller. Is it noticeable? Right off the bat, not really. You do kind of feel like it's smaller, but that's mainly because of the thinness. This is a very thin diver, and you can tell just from the slabs on the side. Unlike the previous version, which kind of looked like a Tudor from the side, this one looks a lot slimmer. And it's not crazy slimmer, but it's enough to notice, and it's enough to be substantial for some people that are pretty diehard for case slimness. And I think they actually improved the crystal here. The distortion from the crystal looks a little more controlled on this variation, or more, I want to say, authentic or original, versus the SLA017, which had kind of a weird distortion that you kind of had to get used to. When I bought it right off the bat, that's the first thing I noticed. But with this one, I feel like it feels more like a original vintage watch as opposed to a recreation because of the way it distorts. Really awesome box crystal sapphire glass here. Same beautiful bezel as before, same case shape. Another change you'll see visually is the strap. This strap is a tropic strap, just like the original which it released on, unlike the SLA017, which had a waffle strap. So that is another change. And lastly, you'll see the case back. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a light engravement, whereas in the SLA017, it was kind of like a laser engraved, like white overlayer on top of the metal. And this one is kind of engraved into it with texture that you can feel. So that's an improvement, because I was always afraid of the white wearing off on the SLA's versions, but this one looks like it'll pretty much stay there. Just like the older Seamasters, which I really loved. So really nice, tidy dimensions. So this case is still Zaratsu polished. It's still made in a Grand Seiko factory, fully assembled and made with the same type of craftsmanship and detail. The movement is also made in a Grand Seiko factory, and it is also a high-end movement, which is the same spec as the previous 8L, which was an undecorated Grand Seiko movement. So you still have the 26 jewels, just like the SLA versions. And that's the same water resistance, 200 meters, and overall same specs as what it runs with. Very comparable to the 8L. Some people are speculating that this is a downgraded movement, but just because the number is a 6 instead of an 8 doesn't necessarily mean that it's a downgraded movement. It's their newer movement line, which all their newer high-end divers are going to be made with. The 6L is the same 6 movement that was in the King Seiko SJE version, which came out, which was the Recreation, which also retailed for roughly $3,300. And that was a very high-end movement as well. But the 6L, which is made specifically for the divers, have tougher water resistance, more magnetic resistance, more shock proof. It's just a much tougher design, and it's thin, so you can make thin diver cases like this one, which are even closer to the original and in a smaller diameter as well. So these new movements are supposedly going to be in all the other Recreation watches that are going to be coming out from Seiko later. So do keep your eyes peeled for those, because you never know, we might get a new slimmer Willard Recreation and a Turtle, a Tuna, who knows. All I know is they are in the pipeline and they are coming, and all the high-end Seiko dive watches are going to from now on use this movement as opposed to the 8L movement because of its new slimline design, because it's newer, and that's kind of the direction which Seiko's headed towards. So I actually have my SLA017 right here, and I want to say when you put them side to side, you do kind of notice that the SLA017 does look bigger. And even though it's only, you know, 1.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters, it does make a difference. And you can see the length from lug to lug is actually longer as well. And that is what gives a watch more wrist presence. And that's what really makes a watch stand out in terms of size on your wrist. Another thing I wanted to point out that I noticed is the numerals on the SJE093 are thicker and they appear bigger than what was on the 017. And the date wheel is white, just like the original, as opposed to silver, which the SLA017 had. The silver does look a little more high-end, and I will give it that credit. I still give props to SJE093 because of the fact that it's more true to the original, and also it is a little more legible. When you see them side by side, they almost look like exactly the same watch, which is kind of the goal, right? They were both one of one recreations of the original. Then you start noticing things like the strap. They kept a black keeper, just like the original, and the silver buckle. And it looks like the buckle has actually changed. So this buckle on the SJE093 is actually higher end than the one on the 017. You can see it has the brush finishes, the sharper edges, thicker steel, just overall just better craftsmanship and made better, as opposed to the simple buckle that's on the SLA017. I have high hopes for the strap as well. It's very supple and very soft, and I hope it's not as much as a lint magnet as the 017 strap is, because that is my only issue with the current one. And right here, you guys can kind of compare the thickness of the two. Yep. See, it's not huge, but it's definitely noticeable. And if you're looking for that sort of thing, you'll definitely notice that the 093 is in fact slimmer and more compact than the 017. Even the lug to lug length, as you can see from top to bottom, if we put them like that, at the bottom you can really see how much longer or shorter the other watch is. As far as the crystal goes, like I said, to me it looks like the 093 is a little more domed, a little more of a box crystal. The 017 actually looks like it's a little lower into the case now. To me, the 017 always looked like it stood out with a nice big bubble crystal, but now the 093 is making it look like there's nothing even there. I mean, they're both awesome watches, and at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to preference. The fact that you can get this for $3,500 and it's brand new with a new movement, nice tidy dimensions, it's really cool because I feel like I finally got to live the moment of a release of an original 62 Moss re-releasing, since I missed out on this one on its original release and kind of had to pick it up a little bit later. It was really cool to get the experience of picking this up, you know, getting it from the AD, like the whole experience was really cool. And this thing honestly makes me smile a lot more than my Rolex Submariner, for example. It's just such a cool watch. And for me, as you guys know, I'm pretty crazy, so these are both going to live in my collection together. For most of you, you're probably going to decide which one you'd rather go with, but I just feel like I need all of them. And I also have my Beams collab over here, which is a really nice watch as well, which is one of my favorites. And this new SJE093 kind of looks like it has the exact same strap as the Beams collab. Even if you look at the buckle, they have the same exact buckle, but on the Beams you have a silver keeper versus the black on this one, which is the same as the 017. But the whole reason for the Beams to get this was because that was the original strap that it had, and they felt like that's the strap that the SLA017 should have offered from the beginning. So it looks like Seiko took note of that and they said, you know what, we're gonna make an entire recreation for it and include that original strap. So this SJE093 is actually truer to the original than the 017. All three fantastic watches, all three gonna live together. I love having these special Seikos. Each one just feels so special to me. It's like my Seamasters. Yes, I could have just one, but if I have the ability to kind of have a little collection of all of them, it makes it feel way more special. All right, now I'm gonna get it on wrist. So this is how it is on wrist, on my 6.5 inch wrist. Fits beautifully, very compact, feels smaller than the SLA017. The strap is not too long. I mean, if you have really tiny wrist, yeah, maybe it'll feel long, but for me, it's not. I know a lot of people on the forums and online were saying that the strap's too long for their small wrist, but it's all personal preference. For me, it's okay. Just beautiful, guys. And you can definitely see the thinness of it. It just sits closer to the wrist. It just feels smaller. Feels kind of like a Black Bay 58 or even a 54, honestly. Very nice. And just for comparison, I'm going to go put this SLA017 on really quick. And there's the 17, and you can see it still fits nicely, but it definitely looks bigger. Definitely has more wrist presence as it's a lot larger on my wrist. It looks like the lug to lug is almost the same width as my wrist. So it is a larger watch for sure. But I just switched back to this really quick just to show you guys how it looked. You guys can have a quick comparison. There's definitely a difference. I feel like this one definitely fits better in my opinion. You know, I need to have all three. That's just how I am. And this nice dark gray dial, almost pitch black, matte black, just a nice touch. Each one has their own vibe, but very fantastic watch. I mean, Seiko knocked it out of the park with this. As soon as I saw the announcement, I just had to have it. From what I hear, they're going to be releasing it throughout the next couple of months. So if you haven't had one yet, or your 80 sold out, they're still coming in. There's still shipments coming in all over the world. So 1963 pieces. During peak COVID, it was much tougher to obtain a watch like this, but I feel like now it got a lot easier and there's less resellers out there and more true fans that are actually putting their money down, or especially this much money, for a Seiko that they really love. So I don't think it should be too hard for you guys to get. It's not too difficult. In my opinion, if you were going to spend X amount on the SLA017, I feel like that's fair enough to spend on this watch because it's just as special, just as nice, and its retail price is pretty high, just as the 017's was. So for example, if you're going to spend a little over MSRP on this watch, but you don't know if you could justify it for this, I say just do it. It's definitely worth it. If you really love the 017, you're definitely going to love this one. Really good iteration. For people that have the 017, should you still get this one? I would say yeah, if you're a diehard collector. If not, you know, it's up to you. But if you do not have the 017, then I highly recommend buying this. If you're planning on picking up the 017, highly recommend just going for this instead. Really awesome piece, guys. All right, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. See you guys next time.